Despite the many problematic areas of slashers, we are always drawn to the slasher genre. Why? Because like any other human, we failed in facing monsters in our lives, whether that monster be us or other people. I watched Halloween released in 1978 for the first time when I was a kid, and I thought, wow. Despite the fact that Laurie dropped the knife and didn't double tap when it came to Michael Myers, as a kid I thought it was iconic to see her survive a slasher that was a monster of the darkness. That led me to many other slasher films like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre of 1974, along with Black Christmas, released in the same year, Friday the 13th, all of them, The Strangers of 2008, Candyman released in 1992, and A Nightmare on Elm Street released in 1984, and every single one after that, and many other slasher films. And though watching most of these slasher films, I saw a final girl who, despite many setbacks, some of her own doing, she lived, she made it to the end, she survived. Everything outside of her said that she wouldn't, but she did, and that has always inspired me, so I decided to make this video as a dedication to the final girl, her will to live, and to analyze the art of her survival. Rich? Almost every slasher film we watch, there's a formula. To keep it simple, the formula is introducing the slasher of the film and the threat of them, introducing the final girl having to survive that said slasher through a chase, and then the final battle where the final girl usually defeats the slasher. Now, what makes this formula so successful? No matter how irritated you are by the final girl, or no matter how the movie ends, the audience still gets that dopamine hit from when the final girl takes that fatal blow to the slasher. This formula, aka story structure, is not unique to the slasher genre or even the horror genre. This story structure is often used in many films throughout all genres and is called the hero's journey. According to Google, the hero's journey, also known as the monomyth, is a narrative structure outlining a hero's transformative adventure, often found in mythology, literature, and film. It involves a hero leaving their ordinary world, facing challenges and trials in a special world, and returning transformed with new wisdom or power. Though this structure has been used in different forms of media since humans could write, the term hero's journey is credited to Joseph Campbell. Continuing with Google, Joseph Campbell, an American mythologist, coined the term hero's journey. He introduced the concept in his 1949 book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, where he described the monomyth, a narrative structure found in various myths and stories across cultures. This framework, often referred to as the hero's journey or monomyth, outlines a pattern of separation, initiation, and return. He identifies stages like the call to adventure, meeting with the mentor, crossing the threshold, trials, the abyss, and the return with the elixir. While Campbell is credited with popularizing the concept, the idea of a hero's journey in storytelling predates his formal articulation. His work synthesized and formalized these existing patterns, providing a framework for understanding and analyzing narratives across cultures and time. Before I continue, I do want to point out that all slashers don't use the story structure of the hero's journey, and some even use elements of the hero's journey, but not the whole thing. Let's break this down through the definition using Nancy, shall we? I mean, the monomyth fits perfectly with Nancy's story from A Nightmare on Elm Street. She quite literally was taken into the dream world by Freddy, where she was then terrorized in multiple nightmares, while also trying to save her friends in the process. And in the end, she not only ends up beating Freddy at his own game, giving her a newfound sense of power, but also wisdom that she gives to the others that come after her in A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, released in 1987. We see the hero's journey time and time again in film where the main protagonist is put against the hardest circumstances in life and yet they overcome it. It's not only inspirational but relatable to the audience watching, in the sense that we all have our own things in our lives to overcome, and we want to see if it's possible for us. And I feel like slasher films nail it every time with the final girl because of who they're up against. The slasher in a slasher film is usually pitched as someone who has taken out multiple victims and that no one survives. We even see the final girl's friends and loved ones around her being taken out one by one, and just when all hope is lost, and just when we think the many mistakes she's made throughout her journey would definitely get her caught up, she makes it out alive, taking down the slasher on the way out. I feel slashers have mastered the monomyth. The final girl is a symbol of the hero's journey. Despite her constant failing, trials, and tribulations, she succeeds in her mission of making it out alive. I believe us, the audience, loves to see this because that's what we want to do in our lives and we want to know it's possible. Now think about all the final girls that you still cheer for in the end when they survived, despite your frustration with them, when they do something you feel just caused them to lose their chance of survival. The same frustrations and regrets that you would have with yourself when you make certain choices that you regret or that you feel ruined everything. That's because that's who we want to be. Someone that no matter how hard life gets or how the possible consequences of our actions can break us, which depending on what was done, rightfully so, we can still get back up, learn, push through, or redeem ourselves and keep going until we reach that finish line and become a better version of ourselves, transformed through the wisdom given to us throughout our trials and tribulations. Now I could stop here and leave the video at that. However, I want to dive a bit deeper into how I feel the slasher genre and the final girl have mastered the hero's journey. Disclaimer, I'm not saying they do it the best out of all genres. However, I am saying that I don't think the intention for the slasher genre was to master the hero's journey, and yet I feel they did. Remember the old man from Friday the 13th?
Here, go on, get! Leave people alone!
You'll never come back again.
Oh, shut up, Ralph.
It's got a death curse.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's how all these final girls felt when their lives turned upside down once introduced to the terror in their films. Most of the time, the final girls are just chilling with life, and I say most of the time because the way that Jess and her other sorority sisters were being harassed over the phone, and that being a normal encounter, is not just chilling in life. So I'll say they're usually just living their lives instead. Then out of nowhere, they're running from a slasher that's wreaking havoc upon their lives. Do they give up and accept the death curse that was thrashed upon them? No. They do their best to survive and use their survival instincts. I feel as humans, whether we want to face it or not, we all have a subconscious fear of death, especially what could cause death to occur. Think Final Destination. Now, the fact that these final girls become surrounded by death, and I mean that literally and metaphorically, because it's definitely common for the final girl to find all of her friends mutilated in some way, shape, or form, hanging off of a wall somewhere before running into the cause of their deaths, which is a slasher. But to continue, we automatically gain this connection with her. She's getting ready to face something that we as a human race are all scared of. The stakes are high when we add an unbeatable threat who at this point in the film we've seen take out multiple characters of the film. Some who are presented as the film's representation of strength, usually through stereotypes. So death becomes certain and is constantly reassured. It almost makes you hopeless, especially knowing that the final girl may not have the training or the strength to even fight back. I mean, are you going toe to toe with him? Or him? Or him? The slasher genre uses certain death as the trial, tribulation, and big bad of the final girl's hero's journey. I know that that point is not unique to the slasher genre. However, I believe that because one of the main focuses in the slasher genre is the death of each character and the brutality of it, it forces you to see the situation for what it is. If you think of an action, thriller, or even a fantasy, that's not the main focus of those genres, and if it is, it's a rarity, or it's presented in a way that doesn't feel as looming. So though the threat of death can be present within any genre, the slasher genre doesn't always shy away from showing you the terrifying, deadly impact that the slasher has in the film.
Ted! Hey, Ted, where the hell's corkscrew?
I know you're probably asking by now, how can I find inspiration in a final girl surviving when the killer comes back for another film? And the answer to that, my friend, is acknowledging that I'm watching a film. I know that studios want to keep going if a film is a success, so that's where I acknowledge that the slasher won't always just gain a tombstone. However, I get enjoyment out of every time they're taken out in the end because you may keep coming back, but you're gonna lose every time. One thing a slasher's gonna do is lose a fight. Like, you're not winning. Let's take a look at Jenny from Friday the 13th Part 2. She has a background in psychology, and before she comes face to face with the one-eyed sack-wearing, pickaxe-wielding maniac, she analyzes his way of thinking, foreshadowing how she will use that skill in the future.
And you know, the only person that ever knew him was his mother. He never went to school, so he never had any friends. I mean, she was everything to him.
Once we finally make it to Jenny versus Jason, she does everything she can to get away from him. Side note, I think this is the most realistic Jason Voorhees we will ever get. She kicked this man in his junk, and he fell to the ground in agony. And in my mind, I'm just like, I just know that if she tried that 4 Jasons after this one, she would have been done right then and there. But let's continue. She kicks him in the junk, cuts him with a chainsaw, and even slams a chair over his back. She was doing some damage, okay? And then we get to Jason's hideout, where he has the head of his mother along with her sweater. And I truly commend Miss Jenny, because she put that sweater on and she mind warped Jason into believing he was talking to his mother for a second. But she moved a little bit too much to the left, and Jason realized her trickery and blocked her machete swinging shot. Now, out of nowhere, Paul, Jenny's boyfriend, comes in and starts duking it out with Jason. I'm not gonna lie, it was random. But Jason and Paul were throwing them haymakers. But that gave Jenny just enough time to get Jason in that shoulder with that machete. And I know Jason pops through the window at the end and grabs Jenny, so he's not technically dead, and Jenny may not have technically survived. But like I said, I understand it's a movie, so this issue gets passed on to another final girl. However, another thing that I find the most inspiring about final girls and their ability to adapt and use what they have to survive, all final girls aren't jujitsu trained and know how to handle, or they lack the tools they need to fight back. So like Jenny or Erin from 2011's You're Next. Despite the final girls having to adapt and then survive just for the killer to still come back, whether it be for them or for new victims, I have the utmost confidence that they're gonna get sat down once again. And I feel that helps the audience gain that inspiration even more. I know it's supposed to cause dread because it is the slasher genre, and well, we as humans don't want to have to face different trials and tribulations. We just want peace. But oddly enough, I believe it does give hope, because despite the slasher coming back over and over and over again, we still get that satisfaction of seeing them being defeated over and over and over again as well, showing that they can be beaten. It adds that much more inspiration to the final girl's journey, aka the hero's journey. We finally made it to the end of the hero's journey. Power and wisdom was gained, and the final girl lived to see another day, until the slasher decides to come back to take on the next generation. Isn't a part of the hero's journey per se, and I know the final girl isn't always brought back to help out the new group of victims, but I think it's really iconic when they do, or at least when they try to bring them back, to pass on their knowledge to help as many people as possible in this new horrific adventure. It shows that they care about the people that came after them, because they could just keep it moving, because the slasher isn't worried about them anymore. They could be really selfish. However, they choose selflessness for the sake of protecting the next generation that comes after them, and I feel deep down that's what we all want as human beings. Like, we want the next generation to not experience the scary things that we may have experienced, and it may be really scary for us to take action to make that happen. So we look at the final girls and see the courage that they have and really root for them because of it. They do what we feel really scared to do, or what we think we can't sometimes. They may not live after their return, but they tried, and they were willing to face what they had already overcome for the sake of the new characters in the franchise. Being a final girl wasn't always a term of endearment. However, as time goes on, it continues to be a title awarded to only the most iconic final girls in cinema. I would like to see a final girl take out the slasher of the film, and that's it. No sequel, no franchise. I know that if a slasher film's a success, that's rare. However, I feel that doing that will really push forward that hero's journey and overcoming adversity, and solidifying that overcoming evil can be done. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching and vibing out with me while I show love to these final girls and analyze their journeys. Let me know what y'all think below about my analysis of the final girl and her hero's journey. But before you go, I'm doing a bonus feature next where I'll be ranking the final girl's hero's journey of different films if you want to stay and see that. If not, remember to keep it kind, y'all. Peace.
And now, on with the show.
So if you decided to stay for this bonus feature, welcome, and I'll be your narrator, Nikia. So let me first explain the rules of this ranking and the meaning behind each tier. Basically, I'll be ranking the story in each film by the amount of elements it has from the hero's journey story structure. I know that even genres that are more likely to have this type of structure front and center don't fully commit because of course that would be a copy and paste of the same story over and over again. The hero's journey needs to have originality, so I understand that the hero's journey isn't meant to be one note and doesn't have to be. This is just a fun ranking to see which slasher films commit to it the most, so let's have fun here. Now to explain each ranking. The film that you would place on the hero's journey tier is a tier for films where the final girl clearly goes through the hero's journey. You can really see the elements take shape in, at the very least, most of the story structure of the film. This tier is not for which final girl you think handled their situation the best, as that would be a tier for who has the best survival instincts. The tier, still very triumphant, is for the films that have the hero's journey, but it just feels like something's missing from that journey for some reason, but it can't be ranked lower. Almost made it to the end is the tier where you saw the hero's journey, but it didn't feel like the story fully committed to that. Like something else took center focus over the hero's journey itself. I Can See the Potential is the tier where you can see the bones of the film's hero's journey story structure, but it just doesn't have the meat, so it just didn't hit that mark. Finally, in my opinion, is a tier where you feel the hero's journey structure wasn't present in the film at all, despite the film seemingly trying to have it in there, or that just wasn't the intention of the film in the first place. I labeled this tier, in my opinion, specifically because, well, we all have different opinions when it comes to how we see films, and also that film's priority probably wasn't to focus on the hero's journey, but to just have hints of it in there. Remember, these rankings aren't to say what film you think is best or who has the best survival instincts, but about the presence of the hero's journey. So a film you rank on the lower tier can be a great film that you love. However, that doesn't mean that we're going for this structure or that structure was present. I chose some very random slashers to rank as well, so it's not really a specific theme when it comes to the slasher films I chose. Now let's get started. First up, we have A Nightmare on Elm Street, released in 1984, and you already know where it's going. Right to the hero's journey ranking. From how she was first introduced to Freddy, to how she handled the trials and tribulations of trying to save her friends, and even uncovering the truth about the origins of Freddy and gaining that wisdom that she would eventually bring to Dream Warriors, to the gray streak in her hair that I know came from stress from the situation. However, think of a warrior winning a battle and leaving with a scar representing their transition into their newfound power and even wisdom, all the way to the final battle in this iconic moment in the film.
I take back every bit of energy I gave you. You're nothing.
I mean, she was quite literally introduced to a new world and was a part of another film within the franchise called Dream Warriors. The triumph you feel when Nancy beats Freddy just feels amazing. So I just have to rank it there. Next is Black Christmas, released in 1974, and I'll rank that at the in my opinion because I feel as though mystery and symbolism was more of the focus of the film versus the hero's journey structure. Yes, you have Jess going through a lot in this film and having to overcome it. However, I don't feel a hero's journey is the focus. For example, the sorority house had been getting calls like that before Billy started calling, so it's not really introducing Jess to a new world. Remember, I'm not saying that this film is bad by ranking it this way, I'm focusing specifically on the hero's journey story structure and how present it is in each of these slasher films. It even left you wondering at the end if she lived or was taken out by Billy, but when you think about the hero's journey, there's no mystery on if the big bad is defeated when you don't think about the fact that the studios are going for a franchise to a successful film. The slashers at the very least are shown being defeated or taken down in some way, shape, or form by the final girl or survivors of the film, even if they show hints of them coming back or they disappear in the end, so keep that in mind. Also, Jess's boyfriend Peter doesn't count because he was obviously a red herring for the actual slasher of the film, Billy.
Who is that? Who is that?
Now we're going on to Candyman of 1992, and we'll be looking at the character of Helen, and I'm gonna go ahead and put this film into the almost made it to the end category because it didn't feel like the main focus of the film was to have a hero's journey, but the elements of a hero's journey that it does have are really present. I feel the main focus is on the lore and presence of Candyman and how he was impacting Cabrini Green. Like, if you think about the ending, I mean, she was a hero because she saved Anne Marie's baby, took out Candyman, and she even came out with literally a newfound power, but it feels more like a curse than a triumph, so I'll rank it there.
I said talk to me, damn it, or else I'm gonna throw you in the fire!
You stupid bitch, you filthy slut!
Then we have Child's Play, released in 1988, and I'll rank that at the hero's journey. This mother and son duo of Karen and Andy were introduced to this new world where dolls can walk, talk, take lives, and have the strength of a fully grown man. I feel like this hero's journey was well executed to a T. The bond of Karen and Andy was tested because of course she wouldn't believe a doll can do what Andy's describing, and they overcame that, but were now introduced to the threat of Chucky and convincing the cop that Chucky was actually alive. And that last shot to Chucky just felt so satisfying to see after all he put them through. You could really feel the triumph of this story, especially because their trials and tribulations were deeper than simply getting away from Chucky.
How are you? Well, I'm Mrs. Voorhees, an old friend of the Christies. Oh, thank you.
Ah yes, Friday the 13th of 1980. So I rank this film at almost made it to the end because I feel like the hero's journey with Alice was introduced later in the film versus it being the majority of the film. Like, if I could give a comparison, A Nightmare on Elm Street with Nancy introduces us to Nancy's hero's journey very early on, actually, when Tina is taken out by Freddy, whereas Alice was introduced to the threat of Pamela Voorhees very later on in the film, causing the film to focus on the mystery aspect by showing the different deaths of characters but not to the knowledge of Alice. We don't get to experience her trials and tribulations for that long in the film before seeing her overcome it, causing her victory over Pamela to not be as impactful as, say, Nancy versus Freddy.
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
On to Halloween, released in 1978. I'll rank this at still very triumphant because though we see Laurie be introduced to this new and scary world early on in the film where Michael is stalking her and her friends, the true threat of Michael comes way later in the film where she goes toe-to-toe with him. I understand that the reason for that is to build tension, however, for it to really lean into the formula of a hero's journey, I definitely say having Michael crank it up earlier in the film would have gotten it placed in the first tier.
There and he's watching us and waiting. What are you waiting for, huh? What are you waiting for?
Now we're on to I Know What You Did Last Summer from 1997. I'll rank this at I Can See the Potential because even though Julie and Ray, since they both survived, were introduced to the threat of the slasher early on in the film, it didn't feel like they were really overcoming it, if that makes sense. Like, yes, Julie and Helen went out searching for clues and trying to figure things out, but honestly it felt like Helen was the final girl that didn't make it to the end. I feel like if that chase scene would have gone to Julie and not Helen, I would have ranked it a tier higher. Also, we didn't see Ray go through any trials and tribulations at all in the film from my memory. I think he just pulled up to the final battle, so I can see a hint of the hero's journey and the potential of one. However, I don't think it hit the mark. My Bloody Valentine from 1981. Like I said previously with other films, it seems to focus on the whodunit vibe of the film versus the hero's journey. So the elements of the hero's journey aren't really there until later in the film, causing the impact of the hero's journey to be less impactful had we had Sarah and Tom be introduced to the threat earlier on. However, I do understand that would have killed the vibe they were going for, which was that mysterious vibe like a nice amount of other slashers. So I rank this in the I can see the potential ranking, especially because when it comes to the end of this film, we don't necessarily see them defeat the slasher of this film and overcome him. He runs off into the mines and technically escapes, and seeing as the film didn't receive a franchise and also the reason behind the character Axel, aka the slasher of the film. Before I continue, this is not to excuse the fact that he goes around offing people. This is an analysis of the story. The reason behind him becoming the slasher of this film in the first place was because he saw the original slasher take out his father. So it was because of his trauma that caused him to do this. So I was thinking that the writer had Axel run off into the mines one-handed as a punishment for ever being alone in the mines and away from society, so he can't hurt anyone else, but also as a mercy so that he won't have to go out into the real world and see this other personality that formed within him because of his trauma. I believe this choice was intentional and was going to happen regardless of if this film got a franchise or not, so that's why I ranked it at I can see the potential. Prom Night released in 1980, I'll place it in the almost made it to the end tier because of this film being once again more focused on the mystery as well, and we don't get a showdown with the chosen final girl and one of the survivors of this film, Kim, until towards the end of the film. I also understand that there are a lot of slashers that take that mysterious route, of course, because a common element in the slasher genre is the mystery. However, there are slashers that allow the mystery to take place within the film, but still introduce the slasher to the final girl or survivors way earlier into the film, and them having to fight them off, really allowing that hero's journey to be present for most of the film. Or the film allows you to spend a long time with the final girls or survivors of the film, having to go through the hero's journey after building suspense and mystery. Examples that I can give for what I mean are Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre released in 2003, and Heart Eyes released in 2025. Before I move on to the next film, please enjoy this 30-second intermission of Kim and her boyfriend cutting it up on the dance floor.
Why are you doing this to us?
Because you were home.
The next film is The Strangers, released in 2008, and if you've seen my video I released recently called When the Strangers Became Slashers, then you can probably guess where this is going, but I'll tell you anyway. It's going to the in my opinion tier because this film I feel isn't focused on beating the slashers of the film and the characters overcoming their trials and tribulations, but more of the terrifying experience the victims are going through. The point of the film is to feel as though it's recounting a terrifying event that two victims went through and that already took place. And the reason why I say feel as though is because this film is based on true events, but it's not an actual recounting of a specific event. The intention wasn't to go for a hero's journey, and it wasn't present in the film, so I'm putting it in the in my opinion. On to the sequel of the previous film, The Strangers Pray at Night. I'm going to put this film on the hero's journey tier because not only do we get to spend majority of our time with the final girl of this film and see her overcome different trials and tribulations, but we also get to see her have a final battle with Man in the Mask in the end, and it's just so satisfying to see that final swing of the bat to take him out. I also like the fact that we saw her after it was all over escaping in the back of a pickup truck, which is a great reference to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre of 1974. And y'all, I know the end was left open as to whether the strangers were still alive. However, remember, I got to check in with the reality that films look for franchise opportunities. And speaking of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974, I placed that in the Hero's Journey tier. Now this could be my recency bias because I have been loving this film and it's now not only in my top 4 slasher films, but now my favorite. So yes, it's a number 1. But seriously, even though I placed it there, we don't see Sally go through her hero's journey until basically the end of the film. I feel because it feels torturous and exhausting for the audience to experience. Like, y'all, I love this film, but towards the end of the film, I feel so exhausted, and I mean that in the best way possible because that means they successfully put me into what Sally was going through. So feeling that exhaust throughout Sally's hero's journey at the end of the film made up for the lack of hero's journey elements early on and really allowed the triumph of her escaping feel all the more sweet. So I'll rank it in that tier.
Leave me alone!
Jill, this is Sergeant Sacker. Listen to me. We've traced the call. It's coming from inside the house. Our squad car is dealing with it right now. Just get out of there.
Now we have a film that was released 5 years after Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and that's When a Stranger Calls, released in 1979. I'll place this film in the in my opinion tier because I believe that the hero's journey story structure wasn't present at all. It feels more like this film was focused on finding the slasher of the film and investigating. The person we follow through most of the film is John Clifford, and though he goes through his ups and downs in the investigation, it doesn't feel as though we're following the hero of this journey and seeing them overcome different obstacles and changing and transforming, if that makes sense.
Come on, motherfuckers. Just die.
I'm taking us back to 2003 with Wrong Turn. And it's so wild how editing can make a film feel different because though Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2003 and this film were released in the same year, it feels so different. Like films released around the same time usually have a vibe of we're in this specific time in history, but let me not get sidetracked. I'll place Wrong Turn in the hero's journey tier because of how it felt so much like a hero's journey because we spend time with the survivors Jesse and Chris as they go through trying to find a way to outsmart the slashers of the film on their own turf, to Jessie losing her friends and being introduced to this whole new world, aka the wilderness, that they have no idea how to travel through, all the way to the epic ending. So I'll definitely rank that one on that tier.
Where is he?
Killed her too.
Oh.
And finally, we have You're Next, which was released in 2011. I'll rank this one on the still very triumphant tier because though the elements of the hero's journey were there, I feel like there was something missing. I think maybe it's because I feel Aaron didn't really have to learn anything to overcome the slashers in the film. And I'm not talking about adapting to survive. If you think about most slashers, despite the audience knowing who the slashers are, depending on if they're watching a sequel or not, the characters within the film have to learn something to overcome them or gain knowledge on the slasher or slashers of the film, if that makes sense. Even characters who knew the slasher previously and their powers may have to learn more because they leveled up during the returning character's time off. The whole point of the hero's journey is to see them overcome and transform through their different trials and tribulations, learning something new about themselves and or the situation at hand, improving in some way, revealing that new power and wisdom that the hero in this journey learned. I feel Erin didn't really experience that. I feel maybe if she found out earlier on in the film that Crispian was behind the home invasion all along some way and then fought to find him and bring that justice to Crispian while also having to fight through the slashers and then meet him at the end to defeat him, then maybe I would have ranked it on the hero's journey tier. That triumphant win did hit. However, it just missed that hero's journey by a tiny bit. So I'll rank it on the still very triumphant. And that, my beautiful people, is the official rankings for these slasher films in the presence of their hero's journey. If y'all stay all the way until now through all of my yapping, seriously, thank y'all so much because this genuinely was a great time for me, and I really hope it was a great time for you and that you decide to subscribe for more content because I got some stuff cooking for spooky season, okay? And I don't want to go into details because I may not do all of them. I'll leave the link to this tier ranking in the description box and let me know below how you rank these films, or if you just have fun and rank the films. Remember to keep it kind. Peace.